Um, Good evening and welcome. It's brilliant to see so many of you. This is the second of a series of webinars that I've been running over the last couple of weeks. Normally, these types of things are presented in swanky hotels, and you've got people wandering around giving you canopies and perhaps a glass of champagne, and you've normally paid a couple of quid to come along as well. So I hope you're sitting very comfortably with your own little canopy and a glass of something nice. I have a glass of fizzy water to keep me going. But these actually, I mean, it's amazing the things that lockdown have taught us. These have proved incredibly successful. A couple of weeks ago, we did one on gut health and digestive health and IBS, which was really well attended and worked very well. So I see no reason why this one won't tonight. The thing that always makes me nervous is the technology and making all of that work. But it looks like we're up and running. You can all hear me, yes? And you can see the slides. Fantastic. That's brilliant. Right. So let's kick off. I should also actually, just before we do start, I need to welcome, we have people who are joining us from Wellbeing Fitness in Northamptonshire. We've got people from Northants Pilates. We have a lot of people from Bedfordshire, and also we have folks from Canada, Australia, Singapore, and the US joining us tonight. Now, you wouldn't manage to get all of that into a swanky hotel room, so technology is working really well. I've called tonight, sometimes it's hard to be a woman, or taking control of your menopause, whichever title you like. And often people ask me, well, first of all, why would a dietitian be interested in menopause? And probably also, why would a man be interested in menopause? I think a man, from the point of view of being a man, as most of you will know, men tend to have big egos, and I like working in menopause because I know it works. I know what we do can really work and make things absolutely better for you. And let's face it, nobody really likes doing anything in their work that isn't effective and doesn't make any difference. So it's an area I've been involved in for the last 20 years. I also love working with women at this stage in their lives, because if you imagine being a dietitian and advising people about changing their diet and their lifestyle, it's a pretty hard sell most of the time. People don't want to change. It can feel a bit like you're flogging secondhand cars in some respects. You know, you're just trying to sell a concept that people kind of know, but really don't want to do something about. However, generally speaking, and it is a generalization, I find at this particular phase in a woman's life, she is far more likely to be in a place where she wants to take control. And her life around her is usually in a place where it is somehow a better time for her to do that. Perhaps the kids are getting to a stage where they don't need her attention so much. Perhaps she's either really comfortable and settled in her relationship, or has realized she wasn't comfortable and settled in it and got rid of it. She might well be in a place in her career where she's doing really well and is feeling confident and accomplished. And generally women, I find, from about 40 onwards, feel pretty much like they know who they are. They don't have to impress other people. They don't necessarily worry too much about what other people think. And therefore, they are free of a lot of the shackles that might have stopped them giving their lives some attention and focus previously. Again, it's a bit of a generalization, but it does tend to mean that as a group, I'm working with people who want to get on with it and want to do something for themselves, which is music to my ears. A little bit of background about me. So yes, I'm a dietitian. I originally was a chef, retrained as a dietitian when I was 25, and I've been working in this particular field pretty much all the way through. I didn't qualify until I was 30. I'm 52 now. I have over the years, I generally now work well, I only work now in private practice, but for quite some time I worked at Queen Charlotte's Hospital in Hammersmith at the West London Menopause Service, where I was providing the dietetic service alongside a man some of you may have heard of, Nick Panay, who is really one of the world's leading authorities on menopause. For many years was the president of the British Menopause Society, speaks all over the world, and I've learned so much from him and his team. And in terms of the knowledge that I've picked up along the way, it's really important that I do have a good understanding of menopause and of the treatments that some women may be on, in order to work with them. I act as the dietetic advisor to Women's Health Concern, which is the patient arm of the British Menopause Society, and they produce some brilliant information, and I'll signpost you towards some of those later on. I've written several books, and I write a lot for the consumer press around diet in general, but specifically menopause. And my clinical practices nowadays, I have 2 clinics in London, one still with Nick Panay in Harley Street, another in Mayfair, and I also work out of the Menopause Hub in Dublin and the Nuffield Leeds hospitals. So that's kind of where I come from. I guess when I think, if I was going to ask you what might have motivated you to come and take some time this evening, often I'll be asked, you know, can diet and lifestyle really treat menopausal symptoms? And as many of you will be aware, they can be incredibly varied, but things like hot flushes, night sweats, some of the effects to mood and concentration, perhaps low libido, insomnia. Can diet fix all of these? Well, the answer is no. So if that's what we were waiting for tonight, I'm really going to let you down. But I can certainly direct you into some treatments that can work for this, and then focus on what diet and lifestyle really can help you with. This is an area where there is so much confusion. And I have to say, unfortunately, very little planning by most women on what they're going to do around their menopause. If you think about it, we really educate and teach women what to expect when it comes to pregnancy. If any of you have got daughters, you will have spent quite a lot of time preparing them for puberty and the start of their periods. Who actually ever told you what was going to happen around your menopause? And if you've got daughters, make sure they know about this. Make sure you prepare them for the choices that are available for them. Because I promise you, if you address your menopause head on and tackle the symptoms you're experiencing with a clear plan, this can be the best time of your life. If you don't, it can be utterly miserable. And I think that's a really important thing to start with. There are many, many choices open to you. And I don't think many women are aware of how much choice they actually have. And that's one of the things that I really want you to take away with this tonight. Now, if we think about even just the word menopause, it's ghastly. It's a horrible word. It comes along, as I was just saying earlier on, at a time when life should be getting better. Usually, you know, as I say, you know where you are in life. You're perhaps a bit more financially secure than you were in your 20s and 30s. Life is good. And then all of a sudden, nature throws this horrendous time at you. Now, what we've got to understand, let's not even call it menopause. Let's call this estrogen deficiency. This is what is happening to you. Estrogen is the hormone that makes you female. It controls the way you think. It controls the way you look. It controls your shape. It controls how your body works. It controls, or it works with almost every single cell in your body. And this period that we call menopause, or the change, or ghastly terms, is something that really nature never expected to happen. If we think about us as human beings, as a species, in terms of how long we've been on the earth, menopause is something that women have only experienced really for about the last 200 years. If we go back to 1840, the average life expectancy of a woman was 43. Menopause doesn't start on average until 47. Nature intended for you to be dead before this even happened. That's why there isn't a plan to make it an easy pathway, because you were never supposed to go through this. Now, with better diets, with better healthcare, with better standards of living, better hygiene, you're expected now to live until you're at least 81. We know, all of you will know women who live into their 90s quite happily and live active, healthy lives. If we accept then that most women will start their periods at around 13 or 14, and you then go through until you're 47, and you might well then live until you're 81 or into your 90s. The reality is you're going to spend 60% of your life out of fertility. So we really need to get you in a place where you have all the information you need to live 3, 4, maybe even 5 decades after your periods and your fertility have finished. And the reality is, no periods and no fertility does not mean you can't have a brilliant, fulfilled, fantastically feminine life. And that's where I think we just have to see it as a phase of life. Are you moving into another phase? And for some, the idea of no more periods is happy days. So there are an awful lot of benefits that will come from this, but the transition from fertility to no longer being fertile is tricky. We often describe the different sorts of symptoms that you might experience as the 7 dwarves of menopause. So we've got itchy, bitchy, sweaty, sleepy, bloated, forgetful, and psycho, all easily describing some of the things that you might experience. Now, don't forget, there are some women that will go through this like a breeze and not really notice anything's going on. There are others who life is almost over for a period of time because these symptoms can be so totally and utterly crippling and debilitating. And those tend to be the women that, you know, we see in clinic. By no means does everybody suffer all of these symptoms, but certainly you might well experience very itchy skin. You might experience changes in your mood where you are just snapping at anybody for no reason, or bursting into tears for no reason, or walking through Sainsbury's and not even remembering what you're in there for. You are not going balmy. You are suffering from estrogen deficiency. Estrogen receptors work in your brain, they work in your skin, they work to your hair, they work in your vagina, they work in your the whole of your body. They control so many of these aspects that make you a woman. That's why, generally speaking, you can concentrate better than a man. Estrogen lets you do that. That's why you can organize things better than a man. Estrogen lets you do that. You might well find that your sleep is disturbed. You might get these vasomotor or hot flushes through the day, or you might find you're waking up in the middle of the night needing to change your bedclothes because you've got so hot. Again, you know, it's quite a funny way to look at it, but the reality is menopause or perimenopause, the time leading up to menopause, can be really quite disruptive. I think let's just separate the two. You are in menopause when you have gone for 12 months without a period. You can be in perimenopause, the period leading up to your menopause, for several years. You can have regular periods and still be experiencing menopausal symptoms. There is absolutely, in terms of diagnosing this, we have new guidance now for GPs. There is no point at all in taking a blood test to decide whether you are menopausal or not. All a blood test will do is tell us what is going on with your hormone levels at that moment. During the perimenopause, the period leading up to your menopause, your hormones are roller coastering. That's why it can feel so lousy. That's why it can change from one minute to another, or one end of the day to another. So taking a blood test is meaningless. The way we diagnose menopause or perimenopause is by listening to you and understanding what's changed for you. And the first way really to have a think about that, because there will be, we all think about hot flushes, but there will be many things that might change for you that you haven't even registered as being connected with menopause. So one of the most effective things to do, first of all, is to just keep a symptom diary. And you might do this for 3 days over a period of, say, 4 weeks, and just see how you're feeling. If things are changing, is your mood changing? Are you finding that you have tenderness and discomfort in places you wouldn't normally have it, your breasts or your tummy? Is your energy levels, for instance, just that can be as simple as that can be a sign that things are beginning to change. But we need to understand what's happening for you, because I mentioned choices previously as being such an important part of it. Until we really understand what symptoms of estrogen deficiency are giving you the biggest problem, we can't then decide which course of treatment might be best for you. So it's a really useful tool. It's also a really useful tool as you go through this journey to see whether your treatments are helping, if there are areas that are still giving you problems, so that your treatment can be tweaked and adjusted and tailored specifically for you. So when I'm talking about treatment, of course, what I'm talking about is HRT. And I just want to, I'm not advocating HRT, but I am certainly not going to be suggesting that if your symptoms are so debilitating that your diet and lifestyle is going to fix that. What I would urge you to do is to get the facts and to give some thought about what's right for you. Now, we will spend a moment, I just want to spend a moment thinking historically. I remember back in the 70s when my mum and her sisters were sitting there all one Christmas, literally with the sweat running off them around a table, talking about how miserable this was. The next Christmas, they literally looked like different women. They were all HRT'd out of their eyeballs, could, you know, literally backflip across the room. They felt fantastic. Back in the 70s, and before then even, we discovered HRT. We made it from horse's urine. We gave it to women in abundance. We really thought this was going to be the cure-all and give everyone eternal life. Then we started to realize that women were getting cervical cancer quite quickly because all we were doing was giving them estrogen. We now know if you still have a uterus or a womb, we have to give you progesterone as well as estrogen to protect you from cervical cancer. Over the years, there have been masses of media stories about HRT giving you breast cancer. And what I want to do, first of all, is just make sure you're really clear about that. The two particular studies that we had, the Million Women study and the Women's Health Initiative, which were two huge studies which gave us these Daily Mail headlines about HRT and breast cancer. There were quite a number of flaws within the studies, particularly in the fact that for the vast majority in one of the studies, they were looking at women who had been on HRT for over 20 years. And quite rightly, there is a significant increased risk of breast cancer if you're on HRT for that long. The guidelines here in the UK are that you are on HRT for as long as necessary to control your symptoms. You are only prescribed HRT to manage your menopausal symptoms. We'll come on to the fact that it does protect you against bone health, Alzheimer's, and heart disease, but you can't be prescribed HRT for that. Let's just think about the breast cancer. So as it stands, these are the facts, not the headlines. As it stands, if we took a group of women, 1,000 women, 23 of them would get breast cancer anyway, regardless of HRT status. If they went on to a combined HRT, so that's estrogen and progesterone, because they've all got their uterus or their wombs, another 4 of those 23 would get breast cancer. So there is a slight increased risk, and that continues the longer you stay on your HRT. But what the Daily Mail doesn't tell us is that if you took that same group of women and they drank 2 or more, that's 1 large glass of wine a day, actually more of them would get breast cancer than the group who were on HRT. The other thing we don't tell them is that if we took a group of women who were overweight with a body mass index of more than 30, an additional 24 of those would get breast cancer compared with the ones that are on HRT. So, and next, the other thing we don't say is if our group of 1,000 women decided to get active and include an extra 30 minutes brisk activity, brisk walking in their week, every week, in actual fact, 7 fewer of them would go on to get breast cancer. So the reality is, if you have symptoms that are disrupting your life, you certainly would benefit from talking to somebody who is an expert around HRT and making a decision about the choices that are right for you. Now, of course, if you have a family history of breast cancer, there are greater risks, but you have to weigh up the risks versus your quality of life. And the way to do that is with a GP who is trained in menopause, and I'll again be able to tell you how I can point you in the direction of those. So there we are with HRT. Yes, there is a slight increased risk of breast cancer, but nothing like the increased risk you see if you're overweight, if you regularly drink alcohol, and the risk that can be reduced by just getting active. Does that make sense? Yeah. Now, let's also then think about perceptions. So those 2 slides I'm showing you, one is from the Women's Health, they're both from the Women's Health Concern, the charity I was talking about, which is the arm of the British Menopause Society. Perceptions of women. So around about, this is again looking at another group of women and asking them what they thought their risks were. And we see here that very few women actually thought that their greatest risk to their health was heart disease, when in actual fact, 50%, I'm sorry, when you are in menopause and you lose that protection of estrogen, your risk of heart disease doubles. And very few women are even aware of that. More women die in the UK of a heart attack and coronary heart disease than anything else. And this is something we don't tell women about. The reality was, the perception was that almost 50% thought their greatest risk of death was from breast cancer, when in fact it's only 4% is your risk. So we have this idea that menopause and HRT means breast cancer, menopause and not HRT means breast cancer. The reality is menopause means heart disease. And there are so many things you can do about that, with or without HRT. So that's where we're going to move on to shortly. So last bit on HRT. There are as many preparations of HRT. You can take it with or without progesterone. You can take it as a tablet. You can take your progesterone as an intrauterine device, like a coil. You can use patches, you can use gels, you can, if you just have vaginal issues, you can take it locally. If you're in France, you can take your HRT in a suppository and put it up your bottom. That's how they like to take everything in France. What I'm getting at is there are so many different types of HRT because we have to tailor it to suit you and to manage the symptoms that you're dealing with. Somebody asked me previously in a question, they were on HRT for 3 years, then their doctor forced them to come off it because they were saying they shouldn't be on it any longer. The reality is, and they came off it and their symptoms came back. The reality is, if you still have symptoms and you understand what the implications are of staying on HRT, you can stay on HRT for as long as you like. We have women in our clinic in their 90s who would break our legs if we took them off their HRT. So you must look at this as an individual case. When should you start? As soon as you've got symptoms, and the majority of those symptoms and the severity of them tends to come in those early stages. So before your periods stop, don't wait for your periods to stop to think that you're eligible or it's the time to do something about it. You do something about it when it starts to bother you. And if you still have some lingering symptoms, go back. You're not necessarily going to get the right preparation immediately. So your HRT might need to be tweaked and adjusted. HRT does not make you fat. Estrogen deficiency will make you fat. And I'm going to talk to you about that. But when you're taking HRT, you're actually increasing your estrogen levels a little to take the edge off your symptoms. So if anything, taking HRT will actually help you to control your weight, but not a lot of women don't find that. If your GP wants to stop you taking HRT, ask them why. And if they refuse to prescribe it in the first place, then you have every right to be asked to be referred to a menopause specialist GP in your area. And that is absolutely your right. If you don't have one in your practice, you have the right to see one. And I'll show you how you can do that. Again, the British Menopause Society has a page on their site where you can literally put in your postcode and you will get all the trained menopause specialist GPs in your area. So you can go to your GP and say, I would like to be referred to one of these, please. Right, I'm not going to bang on about HRT anymore because this isn't an HRT talk. This is a diet and lifestyle. So I've said diet and lifestyle will not get rid of all your menopause symptoms. If it could, I'd be in Beverly Hills, not in Bedford. Unfortunately, you know, we have limitations on what we can do, but what I promise you it can do, if again you face this head on and deal with the facts, is your diet and your lifestyle can save your life, extend your life, and most definitely improve the quality of your life. And I promise you, if you're doing all of those things, this can be the best time of your life. Whatever you are going to do now to your diet and lifestyle, you are going to have to do for the rest of your life. So do not look for quick fixes. That is not appropriate now. This is lifestyle changing we're looking at. And that's what I'm going to spend the rest of the talk looking through. The first thing, people always ask me then, so what is your menopause diet? And then it doesn't exist. I know exactly where I want you to get to, but I can't do that until I know what you're doing right now. So just as you've done with your menopause symptom diary, we have to actually get real about what the quality of your diet and lifestyle is. And if we're thinking about weight, where the energy in is coming from and how much energy you're putting out. So some of you will have seen food and activity diaries at places like Weight Watchers. You might have worked with a dietitian before. Let's just run through these headings and see why I would want you to do that. And again, you would do this for at least 3 days. Then we need to see, first of all, how regularly are you eating? Because if I start to see later in the day that you, or let's say you might be someone who doesn't eat breakfast, doesn't eat lunch, goes the way through, and then actually gets down to tea, sits with a dinner that is twice the size you need, and then grazes your way through the evening on snacks, then clearly there's a problem. If your portion sizes are too big, and most of us are eating much bigger portions than we need, the likelihood is that you're going for too long without eating without eating. So a minimum period I would want to see you not eat is 4 hours, no more than that. I'm a big advocate of a breakfast, a snack, a lunch, a snack, and a supper. But I'm also a big advocate on eating the quantity of food that leaves you feeling satisfied, not stuffed. And the only way you're going to do that is by going into a meal hungry, not ravenous. Many of you, if you have been dieters throughout your life, will have a lot of diet hang-ups with you. And those need to go, because whatever you did to successfully lose weight when you were 30 ain't going to work now. We are dealing with a different body. And this is something that, again, we will speak about in a moment. In fact, let's do it now. The reality then, why does weight become such an issue at menopause? If it was an issue before, it will be a bigger issue now. If it was sometimes never an issue, it may well start to become one now. Again, we're back to estrogen deficiency. The lack of estrogen changes the way your body lays down fat. Previously, before any of this was happening, you would preferentially lay down your fat under your skin. It would be subcutaneous fat, which is quite easy to get rid of. Now, with the lack of estrogen, you are laying down your fat around your internal organs. That's one of the reasons your risk of heart disease goes through the roof, but also because estrogen was giving you protection. Now, the reality of that is fat around your organs is more difficult to get rid of than fat under your skin. So you're going to have to graft now to get rid of this, but you can do it. I promise you, you can do it. The other thing, though, that goes against you, and again, there's no way of dressing this up, this is what is happening. That lack of estrogen is telling your entire body that you are moving into a new phase. That's a very nice way of saying you're aging. And as soon as your body starts to realize you're aging, you lose a small amount of muscle tissue. The muscle tissue is the tissue that processes the calories that go in. It's really your thermostat for your metabolic rate. So if you're losing muscle tissue, your metabolic rate is slowing down, and you're more predisposed to laying fat down around your organs. That is why the majority of women through their menopause can expect to gain around about 1.5 kilos a year for each year that they are in perimenopause. And on average, we're looking probably at about 10 kilos or 1.5 stones, unless you're prepared and you do something about it. And I can show you exactly what you need to do. So you do not have to put up with this. Right, but we have to get real. So we look at your food diary and we look at what are you actually eating. Now, if you are eating pie and chips for tea every night with a couple of pints of lager, it's easy to work out what we've got to change. The reality is it will probably be a little bit more discreet than that. But your food diary will tell me what I need to tell you to get rid of in order to make the change or to tweak and adjust. And again, this is all about choices. I am not going to expect a perfect diet here. I just want a better diet. That's all. So as well as what you're eating, I need to know quantities. We've touched on portion sizes. But I also need to know, what is your day-to-day physical activity like? How much walking do you do? And I also want to know, well, where do you eat? Who are you with when you're eating? And what was your mood? All of those things will help us see what the physical cues for eating are, what the emotional cues for eating are, and what other influences are going on. Once we've got that, then we can really get started. And this is the key for every element that I want to look at around estrogen deficiency. So before we jump into weight, we also need to look at your bone health. Very quickly, looking at this food diary, I'm going to be able to immediately tell, are you meeting your calcium requirements? What are we doing about vitamin D? What's going on with phosphorus, with magnesium? All the things that you need to be able to be sure you're consuming from your diet, or choosing an appropriate supplement to make sure you're taking care of your bone density. Reality again is, if we think about long-term health, now I need you, and you deserve to be a fit, active 85-year-old. The sort of woman that we all look at that thinks, and you think, that's how I want to be when I'm 85, still going to the shops and doing all my stuff. The reality is, women fall frequently in their 70s and 80s. They break their hips. Most of them die. And the reason they die is through the complications of that fracture. You are far less likely to fracture your hip if we can protect your bone density. And the ways to do that will be, I'm afraid to say it again, HRT will help you, but diet and keeping physically active will most definitely support the reducing the loss of bone density. So that's something we have to take care of in your with your food diary. Very simple. I mean, yes, I can talk to you about all the numbers of milligrams of calcium you need, 700 to 1200 milligrams of calcium, 800 international units if you're at risk of osteoporosis, and 10 micrograms of vitamin D. Ugh, who can be bothered with that? What you need is 3 good servings of dairy-rich food or calcium-rich foods each day. That could be milk on your cereal, a matchbox-sized piece of cheese, and a small yogurt. All of those is 1 serving. If you don't use dairy foods at all, then we need to make sure that your alternative choices, your oat milk or soya milk or almond milk or whatever other type of milk you want to use, is calcium enriched. Otherwise, you are going to have to use a supplement. Vitamin D, most of us in the UK must take a vitamin D supplement now, and I would strongly urge all of you to start taking a vitamin D supplement. 10 micrograms, nothing fancy, just off the shelf at Boots or Holland & Barrett. You don't need a posh one. In times like this, where the weather's fantastic, you'll be doing very well for vitamin D. But in the winter, or actually saying in times like this when we are limited how often you can get outside, you must get on a vitamin D supplement. And exercise, simple weight-bearing exercise, will definitely help maintain your bone density. It's one advantage as well. If you've been on the heavy side most of your life, your bones will be dense, much more dense than the skinny girls will. You've just had dense bones from lugging that weight around all those years. But unfortunately, really, really slim girls tend to have a greater risk of osteoporosis than heavier girls. So every cloud, you know. Right, so into weight gain then. What is going on? It's all happening here, the upper body. I mean, there are places where they actually call menopausal weight gain fat back. How charming is that? But all of a sudden, your bra doesn't fit, your blouses aren't fitting, there's a bit of a spare tire over the top of your jeans. It is all happening up here because of this redeposition of fat around those internal organs. Right, some questions first. Are hormones involved in the weight gain you're experiencing? You bet your life they are. This is not you getting greedy or lazy. This is something going on. However, you are following some habits, certainly, that are facilitating that weight gain as well. I've already explained your metabolism does slow down. So if you don't address this and tackle it head on, you will gain weight. And you will possibly gain 1.5 stone, 10 kilos is the average. That's a good dress size, easily. If you've never had a problem again with your weight in the past, you are probably going to now. So you need to address this. This is something that affects every single woman. And even if you used to be able to control your weight easily, it's going to be tougher now. So whatever you are going to do has to be the diet you are going to follow for the rest of your life. And that's why we look at lifestyle change. Right. The first thing I'm going to want you to do from your food diary to control your weight is get rid of 500 calories a day. And again, that depends where you start from. It might be really easy to see. I've got some examples here of obvious sources of calories. And if you look, most of them are around between 150 and 250 calories. Most of them are quite easy things to change, but a big one to look at, wine. If you do like a couple of glasses of wine most nights, you might look at reducing frequency or quantity. You might just even be so in the habit of having a bag of crisps with your packed lunch each day that, you know, you forget how much that can change. What I'm getting at is we need to get really specific about what changes you're going to make. If it is just a case that you eat squeaky clean, then the reality is you probably just eat too much squeaky clean, and we've got to reduce your portion sizes, but we won't know without that food diary. But for a baseline, for most people, this is what we need to do. So forget the idea of whether you need to be on a 1,200 calorie diet or 1,000 calorie diet or whatever. You need to be on 500 calories a day, less than you're on now. But that isn't going to do it on its own. This is enough for most people to generate around about £1 a week. And I don't really want you losing much more than that, to be honest. £2 maximum a week for it to be safe and maintainable. Diet will not do it then on its own. So once we know what you're going to change on your diet, we need to get really honed in on your activity levels. And I'm not talking about the gym. If you go to the gym, congratulations, put a badge on. What we want to start with first is your day-to-day activity levels. And by that, I just mean walking. We know for a fact, if you've got this loss of muscle tissue, which is affecting your metabolism, you can correct that. The only way you can correct it is by building more muscle. And the most effective way to do that is to change your activity levels on a daily basis. So going to the gym once or twice a week is lovely, but that has to be a bonus. If you're not active enough to start with, it's not going to work. So the first thing I want you to do is look on your smartphone, find your, whichever is your free app on there that measures your steps. On iPhones, it's this heart that you see on the slide on the picture on the left. That is on all iPhones. It's installed free and it's super accurate. I go running. My mates have all got fancy watches and what have you. I just use my phone and it records everything as accurately as their £1,000 Garmin watches or whatever they are. So this will record your steps. You've got to have it with you, but it gives us a really good picture. So you find this, you then look at the activity section, work your way through it, and you will be able to see your steps. What's beautiful with it as well, you can see your daily steps, your weekly average, your monthly average, and your year's average. And I'm really interested in your monthly or yearly average. And if it's below 10,000 steps a day, that's where you start your working. You start working on. Very few people I ever see in clinic are anywhere near 10,000 steps a day. To give you an idea of the sort of quantity of time, that's about an hour's minimum brisk walking each day. You can do it in 2-minute bursts. You can go and get it all over and done within 1 hour. You can do it in half hours. You can do it however you want. It doesn't matter. But we need to get that baseline of 10,000. If you're already at 10,000, congratulations, you need to get to 15. Ultimately, what we need to see is a change. That's what's happening to cause this weight gain, a change. We need to create a new change to beat it. Simple as that. Once you've got to this level, 10,000 steps a day, then we can think about intensity, frequency. You can go harder, faster, more often. We can build on this. But trust me, it is incredibly, you need to be incredibly focused to get this happening. And all you need to do is walk. Find circuits around where you live, where you can just go for 10 minutes. Think about your work routine. I know we're in lockdown at the moment, but ordinarily, what do you do with your lunch break? Where do you park your car? Do you work at your desk? All these sorts of things. And again, this is why this is such a perfect time to be looking at this. Whilst most of our lives are slightly different from normal, you can put in some habits now which are going to last you for a lifetime. We're going to be in lockdown probably for another month at least. You could easily really get some brilliant new habits under your belt, ready for when life starts getting back to normal. And this, I swear to you, is one of the most important ones to do. So get some trainers on, get walking. Right. Next thing you want to do though, we still really want to build new muscle groups. So we're looking at replacing those big muscle groups where we've lost some of the muscle through that natural aging process. I'm just showing these pictures. These are all simple Pilates moves. This is nothing you have to go to a gym with. You can, some of them are using weights there. You use your body as your resistance. Ultimately though, your first target would be 4 sets of 10 repetitions of each of these 4 exercises. It takes you about 15 minutes. And I would really urge you, if you don't already know how to do these exercises properly, get some advice. And that I'll point you in I can recommend some people who can show you how to do an abdominal curl without straining your shoulder, how to do a box press up by really working your upper body muscles and not just using your arms, how to do a squat properly that works your thighs. You don't just stick your arse out the back, you really bend properly, keep your back straight, take your core in and work the thighs. All of these exercises, though, we have now seen in clinical trials, if you combine this with the 10,000 steps, the increase in aerobic exercise, the two together with that 500 calorie deficit is the most effective way. It's what I use with every client I work with. The only thing that makes it unique is what their history is in the first place, what it is we're going to change, and how we're going to fit this in. So I guarantee you this, until you've got this, we can't move on to anything else. We can move much further. You know, I've got women who barely walked across the room to begin with. They got their 10,000 steps under their belt. Eventually they did a marathon, you know, but you've got to get these basics in first. So that would be what I would really urge you to focus on. If you were looking for specific Pilates advice, and Pilates, I'm a huge advocate of Pilates, mostly because I do it myself, and it's changed my life. I'm not a sporty person at all, but a combination of dog walking, running most days, and Pilates has got me at 52 fitter than I've ever been in my life. I'm in control of my weight better than I've ever been in my life. And it's because I've really found something that works for me. We've got folk on the call tonight from Wellbeing Fitness. Northants Pilates are another fantastic Pilates organisation. Here in Bedford, we've got Fluid Movement Pilates and Hazel Caddick, who are terrific teachers. And what we will be able to do, I work closely with all of these guys, is I want to talk to you through the Facebook page after this and find out if you wanted support with doing exercise. How do you want it to be delivered? Now, all of us are delivering classes through Zoom. We can do one-to-ones, we could do group classes, we could just make sure that you've got instructions for the exercise. If you tell us what we want, what you want, we will find a way to deliver it for you. But I know it works. So I would really urge you to get some advice, get a routine that you can do every day, and you'll be flying. Right. Now, if you wanted to take this a little bit further and spend some time really looking at your own diet, what I would suggest, I'm doing now, I'm still doing clinics, I'm seeing patients through Zoom every week. I also do a package for over 12 weeks where I work with an individual, we put their plan together, we build really like a transformation over that 12 weeks to completely get their diet, their lifestyle into just becoming a new habit. It takes about 12 weeks to establish a new habit, and that's why I run a 12-week package. However, at the moment, I've decided to try something new, and this is this introductory package, which really has come as a result of doing these Zoom consultations. 6 months ago, I would never have dreamt that the webinars could work as well as they do, or that Zoom consultations could work as well as they do. So I can imagine for a lot of you, you kind of feel motivated and I hope just want to get on with something now. So if that is the case, then something I'm really comfortable to try for the first, say, 20 people who want to do this is, let's get your food diaries, let's get your symptom diaries, then let me remotely put a plan together for you, send it to you, and you can get going. You can use this month or however long we've got left in lockdown to get started. Normally, to come and see me face to face in clinic, it's £175. I'm going to just do this introductory plan to see how it works for less than £50. If that's something you're interested in, or you want to talk to me about consultations or the 12-week programs, just contact me by email. I am very, very happy to work with people around budgets and whatever you might, whatever constraints you're facing. But if you feel like this is the moment and you want to get on with it, then I think this introductory program is something that could be helpful. You might have already decided just from chatting and listening to this tonight that you actually know what you're going to do. And if that's the case, brilliant. But if you do want some help to get started, think about the introduction. In terms of where you can find me, my website is on the bottom here. As I mentioned, I work out of the Menopause Hub in Dublin. Hormone Health is my Harley Street practice with Nick Panay. I'm in Leeds with at the Nuffield. I live in Bedford. I don't have a clinic in Bedford though, but I do certainly at the moment run virtual consultations. And one thing I just wanted to show, I've put the QE2 up there because I used to work on there years ago before I was a dietitian. She is a beautiful spectacle. And the reason I've put her up there is, you could fly across the Atlantic on Concorde in 4 hours, or you could, in the old days when she was still sailing, you could sail across the Atlantic in 4 days. You are beautiful, sleek individuals. Take this slowly, get it right, and you will never, ever have to change your lifestyle again. I think it's really about understand your body, understand what's happening hormonally, and then create a lifestyle plan. And if you want it, a hormone therapy plan that allows you to get the best out of these years that are ahead of you. It really isn't something you just have to put up with or suffer with. And for women, I think, who think there is some kind of medal that should be given for just putting up with it, I think are just living in a crazy world. This is the 21st century, and you can have a fantastic few decades ahead of you if you take control. So with that, that's kind of everything I wanted to cover. I would like to unmute you, if I may, and then let's have a look at, see what some of the questions that have been on the chat. It looks incredible.
The other thing I think that might help sometimes, Jill, as well, and I spoke to Bruce about that today. He makes things an IIP issue when actually they're a course issue.
And see what we've got. Wonder if there's any new questions there. Oh, good. People do know Nick. That's good to see. I wonder if there's any. Yes, if your mum refused to discuss it with you, I would honestly say if you've got teenage girls, teenage daughters right now, you're probably talking to them about their contraception or their puberty. Talk to them about what's happening to you. You're both just at different ends of the same spectrum, so let them know what's going on for you, and share a bit, because actually her moods will be going up and down. Yours are too, I imagine. So don't make it a secret. Something about specific foods. Any specific foods to avoid? No, not really. You know, a little bit of what you fancy does you good. Also, I think, you know, you've got to balance this. You really do. So, no, nothing is banned. Never. Do blokes get menopause as well? Do you know what? No, it's just not fair, is it? But no, we don't. Just on hormone health. Okay. So somebody here already on HRT gel, but the symptoms persist. Definitely go back to your doctor. And you might find some GPs have very much a one size fits all, and they just use one type of HRT. And again, if that's the case and you've kind of exhausted their knowledge, then let's get you to see somebody who is a specialist in that area. As I mentioned earlier on, you have every entitlement to do that. So you don't just put up with the first one you're given. At the moment, some of you may also be experiencing, if you are or currently taking HRT, that there are shortages of a number of the HRT preparations. It is a problem. However, there is lots of guidance from the British Menopause Society on alternatives that will give you the same doses of estrogen and progesterone, and some women will take a little bit of testosterone as well, particularly for things like low libido. So again, we need to make sure that if your GP isn't too sure on that, that we point them in the right directions. I am really, really happy to, if you've got questions for me that aren't just about making appointments to see me, it doesn't matter, just contact me. I will nearly always be able to point you in the direction of a good fact sheet or a resource that you could point your GP to that will be able to help them. So really don't hold back. There is also, if any of you are using Facebook, I've got a section on my Facebook page, which is, I think it's message me on, it's Nigel Denby Dietitian on Facebook, and I'll invite you to join this group. It's a closed group, and there I share all sorts of information that I pick up from the various clinics I work in to try and keep you up to date. Somebody else also mentioned to me before the session about histamine intolerance. Histamine intolerance is something that one of the doctors I particularly work with in Harley Street is very interested in. It is, it's a horrible situation where your body starts to react in ways that we'd often see in things like irritable bowel syndrome, but it's not irritable bowel syndrome. It can really leave you feeling pretty poorly. It can be treated quite easily. We often work around a small exclusion diet for a period of time and then combine that with some medication to make it more manageable. But histamine intolerance is something that we do see more commonly in women around menopause. So if it's something you've read about and you would like some pointers in the direction of where to get help, I can certainly direct you towards the doctor's name who I work with is Tina Pears, and she is really fantastic in this area. Just want to see if there's any more right. So if somebody there's a question here about somebody unable to take HRT and are there alternatives? Yes, there are. And you can use things like there are some herbal preparations that can be helpful for some specific symptoms, but, and the big caveat is, they are not sweeties. They're not my area of expertise. I can point you in the direction of somebody who does specialize in that area. However, the evidence for many of them is a little bit shaky, and there are some contraindications. We do also know that things like acupuncture and hypnosis can be helpful for specific symptoms. Also, there are a lot of women who believe they cannot take HRT, when in actual fact there is a higher risk to them because of other conditions if they take HRT. But with an understanding of those risks and with talking to a doctor who specializes in menopause, together you can make a decision about whether you want to try HRT for 6 months and see if that helps, knowing and accepting the risk versus the benefit. So all I would say, excuse me, is with a longer conversation, we'd try and find out where the idea that you couldn't take it comes from. But yes, there are alternatives. The idea, a lot of people like to use a lot of soya products and phyto plant estrogens. There is some evidence that they can be helpful at reducing the frequency and severity of hot flushes in women at the younger end of menopause. So that would kind of be under 50. The reality is, though, to get that benefit, you've got to consume 26 grams of soya protein a day. And that's quite a commitment. That you have got to eat a lot of soya every single day to get that. There are soya supplements available, but unfortunately, the evidence for their efficacy is not brilliant, because often they are produced chemically or they're treated to make the supplement, and we often find that the active estrogen ingredient in there is damaged through that processing. So really, you've got to do it through food. Lovely. If that's the case, Eb, about worrying about being taken off your HRT, that's your choice. You don't have to stop anything. Right. Have we got any more questions? How do you know when you finish the menopause? Well, you never really do. As we said earlier on, once your periods have stopped for a whole year, that is when we would call you menopausal. You are then in the menopause. You are in the menopause for the rest of your life. The perimenopause is that period leading up to the cessation of your periods. That can last for a year, 10 years for some women. It really does vary. So unfortunately, you don't finish the menopause. Histamine intolerance. So certainly, Teresa, I'd be very happy to send you some info I've produced on histamine intolerance that might be useful. Drop me a message perhaps on Facebook, and we can do that. Is there a particular book that you would recommend for postmenopause? I am trying to get a publisher to let me write a book on menopause. I've just written a chapter for doctors in what we call the Menopause Bible. It's called Managing the Menopause in the 21st Century. And I've written the nutrition section on that. But yeah, it's is there a one I've written? No, there isn't. But if we can get enough women to say they would like a book written on the menopause, then I think we ought to be able to do one. I've written several of the For Dummies books, you know, the black and yellow books, and I would really love them to do a Managing the Menopause for Dummies. So that's where I'm trying to get one launched. Right, I think no, HRT is not made from horse urine anymore. We stopped that years ago. Usually, yes, it's often made from yams, all sorts of different things, but no horse urine. I think that's all the questions that have come in.